Well, something brand new here on Lifelong Streetcar. We're starting to incorporate video. So if you're listening to this on air, you're not seeing the fabulous video, but you'll be able to check that out soon on our website. And just something new for 2024 thought we'd incorporate. And we're going to start with Lori Shepard from the Tucson Jewish Museum and the Holocaust Center, which is on Stone, just north. You're in Barrio Viejo, right?
Just south of downtown. Yeah.
Well, you're in downtown. You're like a half a block, or half a mile from the street.
It's 564 South Stone.
Okay.
So it's really close.
And you're near the 5 Points intersection.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I guess we're probably closer to 5 Points than we are to downtown, but not by much. Okay. It's about halfway.
Well, at 5 Points right now, with all the developments happening there, it's certainly worth the trek, the half a mile trek from
absolutely
from downtown to there, and then you can stop by the museum on the way and take a peek. So tell us a little bit about first of all the museum itself. This building is very significant in Southern Arizona history as well. It
is. So interesting that you said you're really close to downtown. So when this building was built in 1910, the paperwork actually said on the outskirts of Tucson. But that today we are really close to downtown. The synagogue that we are housed in, we are not a synagogue, but we have on our little campus a synagogue, a museum, and then the Holocaust Center. And the synagogue that we are housed in was the first Jewish temple in all of the Arizona territory.
Oh, I thought just in Tucson, but the entire territory.
The entire territory. Okay. In fact, at that time, if you needed any Judaic services, if you needed a wedding, a life cycle events, bar mitzvah, you had to go either all the way to El Paso, Texas, or San Diego, California.
Okay.
And I always tell people, and we didn't have I-10 back then, so it wasn't as easy. So while the first Jews started coming into the Arizona territory in 1860 to 1865, when most of the pioneer settlers started coming in, they didn't actually have a house of worship until 1910.
Wow. That's quite a while. So did they have informal places, or did they travel?
They did. The first organized services were actually held at Alex Levin's Levin's Park. If you know Tucson history, most people don't know Levin's Park. And actually, if you went to the Pennington Street where Levin's Park was, and it was a huge part of Tucson history, it's now a really nice municipal parking garage. So it's not good. But that's where the Jewish community first started meeting, was in Levin's Park. Levin's Park was a brewery, Pioneer Brewing, and he opened the first bathhouses in southern Arizona.
So this is why this show just keeps growing, because now I've got to do research and find out about Levin's.
I'll get you some information. It's actually fascinating. He had an archery range, a movie theater, a restaurant. Levin's Park was a huge part of downtown. Huh. Until it wasn't.
Well, at least now it's parking.
And now it's this beautiful parking garage.
So the museum then, when did it transition from a house of worship to an actual museum?
So it was the Reform Temple here in Tucson from 1910 until the late 1940s, actually. Okay. And then it's a tiny little space. When you come to visit, you'll see it's a really tiny little space. And so quite frankly, the Jewish community just outgrew it. And in 1930s, the conservative movement opened Congregation Ansha Israel, and so the Reform movement moved over to where is now Colamy, on Broadway.
Okay.
On Broadway, and so they sold the space. They sold it to different churches, and actually, so several different Protestant churches lived in that space. They would go into that space, utilize it as they were growing, and then when they would buy a new space and move on, they would sell it to the next. And so it sort of passed in this way for several decades. And then in the 1980s, it became a Spanish language radio station. Across the street in 1936 was built the Mexican consulate, and it stayed there until 2020, until it moved to its new location. So a Spanish language radio station was just the right thing across the street there. But when the Spanish language radio station left that space, it just fell into disrepair. It became vacant. Squatters moved in. A lot of damage happened to the property. And at some point, the owners just couldn't sell it. And they thought, well, I guess we'll tear it down. I've heard they were going to make it a parking lot. which is just heartbreaking.
Yes.
But the organized Jewish community came together and said, wait, we can't let that happen. This was the first synagogue in the Arizona territory. It was built 2 years before Arizona even became a state. We have to preserve this. So they came together, and through the 80s, they raised money. It became the Stone Avenue Temple Project because no one was exactly sure what would happen with it. Then it became...
Is this in any relation to the Stone Temple pilots?
No, it's not. It's not. But I have actually accidentally said that before, because who can help it if you're of a certain age?
You just never know.
If you're of a certain age.
Sorry, that's horrible.
So the Stone Avenue Temple Project became the Jewish Historical Society. The Jewish Historical Society morphed into a fabulous Southern Arizona Jewish History Museum.
Okay.
And as things continue to change and grow, as we have, then we eventually added a Holocaust Education Center next door, which was at the time just one room in a house next door. And eventually we realized we needed a whole Holocaust museum. And in 2016, we opened the Holocaust Education Center.
And does that focus on stories or families of those in our region, or how does that? What is it? What is the education component?
I'm so glad you asked that. So everything that we do focuses on what we call intimate histories. So in the synagogue, we tell the story of Southern Arizona Judaism. We talk about what the history of Judaism looked like in Southern Arizona. What does it look like today? When you come next door into the Holocaust Center, while we are a history museum, so we have the requisite timelines and we talk about the 10 stages of genocide, all of those things, we do everything in that space through the eyes of the more than 270 Holocaust survivors who came here and made Southern Arizona their home.
I did not know that.
We call that intimate histories.
Okay.
We can tell you all of those pieces from the timeline and give you all of the important geopolitical aspects and dates, but really what is going to make a point and stick with visitors is when we tell these really personal narratives, these really personal stories. So we try to do that whether we're in the historic synagogue or we're over in the Holocaust Education Center. I feel like I know these people who some who haven't been with us since the 1800s.
And it's interesting. So then, and I haven't done enough research. Then on your website, do you then kind of break down like the families and those types? And can people do genealogy and things through your?
What another great question. We actually have a genealogy program with Joel Alpert, a gallery chat coming up. Now that is less about local and more about shtetls through the Holocaust. There's a whole project with that that'll be coming up later in January. You can check out our website for that event. But we try to focus on telling the stories. So we talk a lot about pioneer Jews, but I've taken to calling it pioneering Jews, because this can be everybody from folks who came here in the late 1800s to the people who are making a difference today, right here today. So our Holocaust survivors, I told you we had more than 270 who made Southern Arizona their home. Right now, we have there's some question about this exact number, but right now we have about 12 who are very active and still speak. They come out and speak to school tours. Every school tour that ends, they end with getting to meet a Holocaust survivor. We have a couple more dozen who are not active. They're not able to be. They're in their late 90s. And so it's a very difficult time for us right now because we're saying goodbye. Yeah. We're saying goodbye to too many. And we know that's just going to happen. We've lost most of the greatest generation when you think about those who fought in World War II, those who were liberators of those concentration camps. Most all of them are gone now. And so the Holocaust survivors that we still have with us are all children of the Holocaust. So they were all, most of them were teenagers or younger during the Holocaust.
Yeah, and the opportunity, I know from working on projects with World War II veterans, the opportunity to speak with someone who's experienced that history. And you can read about it in a book, but when you hear someone speak and you hear their voice crack, or you hear that emotion, those words resonate so much more deeply. And I think it's wonderful that they take the time right now to share that so that we continue that tradition as long as possible.
It's so important, and this legacy for them is so important. Each of them has a unique story. Each each person that went through the Holocaust, those who survived and those who were lost, has a unique story.
Yeah.
So for us, we know that a life is not lost to oblivion until their name is said for the last time. So we really try to do everything in our space through their names, through their eyes, and using their legacy. And their personal stories, they're going to impact students and visitors much more greatly than me giving them a dissertation on the dates.
Right. And what you're doing here on Stone, is this something that you see across the country where it's really regionalized and you're telling the story of that region, or are you kind of pioneering in this, or?
It's a great question. There's just under 20 freestanding Holocaust museums in the United States. There's about 125 Holocaust education centers. Some of those are connected with universities. Some of those are just individual, like ours is in the community. And what I find is each one has a unique way of telling the story because each community is unique. So typically when you're on a campus, I won't speak for every campus, but typically when you have a Holocaust education center on a campus, it's very academic. It's very focused on the academia, the pedagogy of it. When you come to a museum like ours, or previously I was in El Paso, Texas at the El Paso Holocaust Museum and Study Center, those are much more personal. And I think that the personal is a way to connect that stays with you. It really stays with you.
I personally, I think that, and I think that's why I do the show, because to hearing these stories and talking to people that are either involved or impacted or related family-wise to those that made these changes, it certainly resonates more with me. And not that the exact figures and the history of it is very important, but I think
it's important in a different way, right?
Yeah, I think so. So you came from El Paso then. How long have you been in Tucson?
It will be 2 years this March. March 2024 will be my second anniversary.
Okay. May I ask what brought you from
this job?
Okay.
Working at the Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center. It brought my family here, and we are so thankful. And
so before that, you were doing a similar role in Texas. And
I had been the executive director of the El Paso Holocaust Museum and Study Center. And then we might have made a little foray over to Phoenix, but it didn't take.
So, and then how long have you been involved with this type of work?
Close to 2 decades.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a passion. It's something that once you start doing it, you really, it's hard to, I left this work for a very short amount of time, and I won't say where I went, but I went to an amazing nonprofit with a fabulous mission, and I fabulous people that I worked with, and every day I thought, this isn't where I'm supposed to be.
Right. Yeah.
This is not where I belong. So when I had the opportunity to talk with them, they called about this position. It was a no-brainer. It was a no-brainer because the work, it stays with you. It stops being work.
And I think, and I'm sure every city can say this, but the unique melting pot that Tucson has been over the last couple of hundred years is just quite amazing to me. And that's something we've uncovered in talking to many different people and not realizing the impact of so many different cultures and how the cultures impacted each other. So I think that as you dive more deeply into some of these stories, I think it's going to be interesting to see all of these cross sections and how they come out. The intersectionality of the communities is so powerful. One of our favorite things about the museum is that we are down in Barrio Viejo. We are next door to the AME Church. It was built in the 1930s. Rabbi Gumbiner and Rabbi Bill Gray both worked closely with the congregants of the AME Church. And they did that in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And the AME, that's the African American, Episcopal Church. My apologies for not clarifying. And it's just north of you on Stone, and you can see that, another really historic building as you're walking down. And just knowing that they were doing this work, they were doing this social justice, social action work together. Then the Reverend from that church was just over. We had our Hanukkah candlelighting service just a few weeks ago, and Reverend Gene came over and joined us for that. And just having the moment of the two of us standing in that same space where the minister and the rabbi stood, just
just knowing that we have that continuation. The thing about Barrio Viejo is that it has always been such a diverse intersectionality of different communities. You had Chinese immigrants who lived there.
And just on the back side of you, there's like the Liho Market was just, just a walk away from you.
Exactly. And so when you walk around that area, there's a wonderful walking tour. It's not related to us at the museum, but it's a fabulous walking tour of that area. And it's so powerful because you see this was no one thing. This was all of these communities coming together and making a community. Yeah. Really fabulous.
So with the museum, let's talk about some specifics. So, like, how do people find more information? What are your hours? What are your costs? Give us the details.
Well, we are absolutely a free museum. We don't want anyone to be turned away because they can't afford. We do everything we do with kind donations. So while we're a free museum, we do accept donations, but we are a free museum. We are open Wednesday through Sunday from 1 to 5. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of programming that happens as well. You can find all of this on our website, which is www.tjmhc.org. Okay. So that literally stands for Tucson Jewish Museum and Holocaust Center. Okay. .org. You can find the address. There's free parking on the street, which we're grateful for. Plentiful parking. And we'd love to have visitors come down, check it out. What we find is most people say, I had no idea this was here. So I don't mind that we're such a great kept secret, but I'd like to be a little less of the best kept secret in town. I'd like to talk with folks like you and let more people hear about it and come out and see us.
Well, Lori Shepard, I appreciate your time in this. I appreciate your energy and enthusiasm moving from El Paso to Tucson. And I look forward to kind of checking out and learning more about that museum and kind of digging in. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.